The rope chafed Kessa's wrists as the trader's cart lurched to a sudden halt, and she knew before he even turned around that something had gone terribly wrong with whatever bargain he had struck for her. "Out," Merchant Grell said, his voice flat and devoid of the oily pleasantness he had used when purchasing her from the slavers 3 days prior. "Get out of the cart." Kessa's green fingers fumbled with the bindings as confusion swept through her. They had been traveling for days toward what Grell had promised was a household looking for laborers, someone willing to pay good coin for an orc woman strong enough to work fields or haul lumber. She had dared to hope, in the quietest corner of her mind, that perhaps this new master would be kinder than the slavers who had taken her after her clan cast her out for defending a human child from their raid. "I set out." Grell yanked her from the back of the cart with surprising strength for a man of his years. Kessa stumbled onto the dirt road, her legs weak from days of sitting cramped in the wagon. The autumn sun hung low in the sky, painting everything in shades of amber and gold that would have been beautiful if not for the terror rising in her chest. "Please," Kessa said, hating how small her voice sounded. "I will work hard. Whatever price they wanted, I can prove my worth." Grell was already climbing back onto his cart, gathering the reins. "The buyer took ill and died 2 days ago. His son wants nothing to do with his father's eccentric plans to hire an orc. No buyer means no coin, and I'm not feeding you on my own silver while I search for another fool willing to purchase your kind. But where am I supposed to go?" The question came out sharper than she intended, her small tusks catching the light as she spoke. "You cannot just leave me here in the middle of nowhere." "Canninum," Grell said, snapping the reins. The horse started forward and Kessa instinctively reached for the cart's edge, only to have Grell kick at her fingers. "Your property without papers now, girl. Best you disappear into the woods before the local militia finds you. They're less kind to wandering orcs than I am." The cart rolled away, wheels crunching on the packed earth, leaving Kessa standing alone on a road she did not recognize in a land she did not know. The rope still hung from her wrists, marking her as either an escaped slave or unclaimed property. Neither designation would earn her mercy if she encountered the wrong people. Kessa looked around desperately. Forest flanked both sides of the narrow road, dense with oak and elm trees whose leaves had begun their autumnal transformation. Behind her, the road curved out of sight. Ahead, it stretched perhaps another quarter-mile before bending around a hillside. She saw no buildings, no signs of civilization, nothing but the road and the woods and the rapidly setting sun. Her stomach growled, reminding her that Grell had fed her only stale bread and water for the past 2 days. She had no food, no shelter, no coin, and no plan. The rational part of her mind said to head into the forest, to hide and forage, and perhaps find her way to the borderlands where orcs and humans sometimes traded in uneasy peace. But she was exhausted, frightened, and so very tired of running. Kessa sank down at the roadside, working at the knots on her wrists with her teeth. They were stubborn, tied by someone who knew their craft, but eventually she managed to loosen them enough to slip one hand free, then the other. She rubbed at the raw skin, wincing at the rope burns that had formed during the journey. The sound of hoofbeats made her freeze. Someone was coming down the road from the direction Grell had gone. Kessa's first instinct was to run, but where? Into the woods where she might become lost. Further down the road where she had nowhere to hide. Instead, she remained sitting, making herself as small as possible, hoping whoever approached might simply pass by without noticing a lone orc woman on the roadside. The hoofbeats slowed, then stopped entirely. Kessa looked up to find a man on a sturdy brown gelding staring down at her, with an expression that was equal parts surprise and concern. He was perhaps 30 years of age, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and warm brown eyes that seemed to take in every detail of her situation in a single glance. He wore simple but well-made clothes, a miller's smock covered in a fine coating of flour dust, and he sat his horse with the easy comfort of someone who spent considerable time in the saddle. "Are you hurt?" the man asked, and Kessa was startled by the genuine concern in his voice. She shook her head mutely, unable to find words. Her mind raced through possibilities. He could be riding to fetch the militia. He could try to capture her himself, to sell her for whatever price an orc woman might fetch. He could simply ride past and pretend he had never seen her. Instead, the man dismounted, moving slowly as if approaching a frightened animal. "I'm Isaac Joranson," he said. "I run the mill about a mile up this road. Did someone hurt you? Those marks on your wrists look recent." Kessa pulled her arms closer to her body, trying to hide the evidence of her bondage. "I am fine. Please just go. I do not want trouble." Isaac did not move away. His eyes were kind but sharp, taking in details she wished he would not see. The rope lying in the dirt beside her. The way her clothes hung loose on her frame, evidence of too many days with too little food. The exhaustion that must have been written plainly on her face. "That's rope burn," Isaac said quietly. "And you're sitting on the road at sunset with no supplies, no horse, nothing. That's not fine by any measure I know." He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "Were you with the trader who passed through town earlier, Merchant Grell?" There seemed little point in lying. Kessa nodded once, a short, jerky movement. "He said he was heading to the Mordecai farm to deliver some goods," Isaac continued. "But I just came from that direction. The farm's been abandoned for 2 days, ever since old Mordecai died. His son wants nothing to do with the place." "The trader's buyer fell through," Kessa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said he would not waste coin feeding me while searching for another, so he left me here." She watched Isaac's expression darken, anger flashing across his features, but it was not directed at her, she realized. "It was for her. That bastard," Isaac said, and there was real heat in the word. "You can't just abandon someone on a road like this. Nights are getting cold and there are wolves in these woods." "I am an orc," Kessa said, trying to inject some steel into her voice. "We are stronger than humans." "I will manage." Isaac looked at her for a long moment, and Kessa found she could not hold his gaze. There was too much understanding there, too much kindness. She had learned not to trust kindness from humans. It always came with a price. "You look half-starved and exhausted," Isaac said bluntly. "And those rope burns need tending before they fester. I'm not going to leave you out here to freeze or get torn apart by wolves." He extended his hand. "Come back to the mill with me. I've got food, clean water, and salve for those wrists. No strings attached." Kessa stared at his outstretched hand as if it were a snake that might bite. "Why would you help me? Your kind does not help mine without reason." Isaac's hand did not waver. "My kind. I'm just a miller, not a representative of all humanity, and my reason is simple. You need help and I can provide it. That's all the reason necessary. You do not know me. I could be dangerous." A smile tugged at the corner of Isaac's mouth, but it was not mocking. "You could be. But sitting there looking like a strong wind might knock you over. I'm willing to take that risk." His expression sobered. "Look, I know what people say about orcs. I know what stories get told. But I also know what I see in front of me, which is a young woman who's been treated poorly and left to fend for herself. That doesn't sit right with me, regardless of what color your skin happens to be." Kessa wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at her not to trust this human miller with his kind eyes and extended hand. But what choice did she have? Night was falling. She had no supplies, and the alternative was to take her chances in the woods or on the road. At least if she went with Isaac, she would know where the threat came from. Slowly, hesitantly, she placed her hand in his. His grip was warm and calloused from years of physical labor, and he helped her to her feet with a gentleness that surprised her. She stood a few inches taller than him, broad-shouldered and strong despite the recent hardships. She saw him take note of her size without apparent concern. "Can you ride?" Isaac asked. Kessa nodded. Her clan had kept horses, and she had learned to ride as a child, though it felt like a lifetime ago now. "Good. We'll ride double. It's not far." Isaac swung back up into the saddle, then extended his hand again to help her up behind him. The gelding shifted under the additional weight, but did not protest. Kessa settled behind Isaac, unsure where to put her hands, finally resting them lightly on his waist when he did not object. The ride to the mill took perhaps 15 minutes, following the road as it wound through increasingly cultivated land. Fields stretched on either side, recently harvested and lying fallow for the winter. In the distance, Kessa could see a cluster of buildings that marked a small village, smoke rising from chimneys as families prepared their evening meals. But Isaac guided the horse away from the village, turning onto a narrower path that led to a sturdy wooden structure built alongside a swiftly flowing stream. The mill was larger than Kessa had expected, a 3-story building of solid timber construction, with a massive water wheel turning steadily on its side. The sound of rushing water and creaking wood filled the air. Beside the mill stood a smaller house, clearly Isaac's residence, with a well-tended garden and a small stable for the horse. Isaac dismounted and helped Kessa down, then led the gelding into the stable. "Make yourself comfortable," he called over his shoulder. "I'll just be a moment getting Barley settled." Kessa stood uncertainly in the yard, unsure what to do with herself. The mill and house were well maintained, speaking of a man who took pride in his work and his home. She noticed details: a stack of firewood neatly arranged near the house, herbs growing in a small garden plot, a bucket hanging from a hook near the well, ready for use. Isaac emerged from the stable and gestured toward the house. "Come on, let's get you fed and those wrists cleaned up." The interior of Isaac's home was as tidy as the exterior. The main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a large hearth dominating one wall and a sturdy wooden table surrounded by chairs in the center. Shelves held dishes, cooking implements, and a surprising number of books. A staircase in the corner led to what Kessa assumed were sleeping quarters above. "Sit," Isaac said, pointing to a chair near the hearth. He moved about the kitchen with practiced efficiency, building up the fire and filling a pot with water from a barrel near the door. "I've got stew from last night. It'll be warm in a few minutes." Kessa sat gingerly on the edge of the chair, ready to bolt if necessary. She watched as Isaac rummaged through a cupboard and produced a small clay jar and clean cloth. He brought them to the table, then pulled up a chair across from her. "May I see your wrists?" he asked. Reluctantly, Kessa extended her arms. The rope burns were angry and red, worse on her left wrist where she had struggled more against the bindings. Isaac examined them with a gentle touch, his brow furrowed. "These need cleaning first," he said, rising to dip the cloth in the water barrel. He returned and carefully cleaned the wounds, his movements precise and careful. Kessa hissed softly when the cloth touched the worst of the burns, but Isaac murmured an apology and continued with even greater care. Once the wounds were clean, he opened the clay jar and applied a salve that smelled of herbs and something faintly sweet. The cooling sensation was immediate and blessed. "My mother's recipe," Isaac explained. "Good for burns, cuts, most anything that needs healing. Keep it on and the wound should close cleanly without festering. Thank you, Kessa said softly. It was perhaps the first genuine kindness anyone had shown her since her exile, and she did not quite know how to process it. Isaac smiled and rose to check on the stew, which was beginning to bubble over the fire. He ladled generous portions into 2 wooden bowls and brought them to the table along with thick slices of bread and a pot of butter. The smell made Kessa's mouth water. Eat, Isaac said simply, settling into his own chair. Kessa did not need to be told twice. The stew was rich with vegetables and venison, seasoned with herbs that made every bite a revelation after days of stale bread and water. She tried to eat slowly, to maintain some dignity, but hunger won out. Isaac did not comment on her ravenous appetite, simply pushed more bread across the table when she finished her first slice. They ate in silence for several minutes before Isaac spoke. "So what's your name? Or would you prefer I call you something else?" "Kessa," she replied, her mouth half full of bread. She swallowed quickly. "My name is Kessa." "Well, Kessa, you're welcome to stay here tonight. I've got a spare room upstairs. It's small but clean and the bed's comfortable enough." Isaac paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I won't pretend to understand your full situation, but it's clear you've had a rough time of it. You can rest here, get your strength back, and then decide what you want to do next. No obligations, no expectations." Kessa studied him, searching for the catch, the hidden price for his generosity. But his expression remained open, honest in a way that seemed almost foreign to her after so much time among slavers and their ilk. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why help me? You could get in trouble for harboring an orc. Your neighbors might not understand." Isaac set down his spoon and met her eyes directly. "My father fought in the border wars," he said quietly. "Came back with stories about the orcs he'd fought, the terrible things they'd done, the friends he'd lost. For years I believed every word, believed that orcs were monsters who deserved nothing but death." He paused, his expression distant. "Then one winter, a group of orc refugees came through this area, fleeing some conflict in their own lands. They were starving, desperate. Most people wanted to drive them away or worse. But the village priest convinced a few of us to help, to provide food and shelter for a few days until they could move on." He took a drink of water, collecting his thoughts. "I met an orc woman during that time. Her name was Tharka. She'd lost her entire family to the fighting and was traveling with her sister's children, trying to get them somewhere safe. We talked, really talked, and I realized that everything I'd believed was wrong. She wasn't a monster. She was just a person trying to protect the ones she loved, same as anyone else." Isaac's smile was tinged with sadness. "They moved on after a week, but that conversation changed how I saw the world. I swore that if I ever had the chance to help someone the way we helped Tharka, I would. No questions asked, no judgment passed." Kessa felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. "That is a good reason," she said softly. "It's the only reason I need," Isaac replied. He pushed back from the table and began clearing the dishes. "Now you look like you're about to fall asleep in your chair. Let me show you the room upstairs." The spare room was indeed small, barely large enough for the narrow bed, a small dresser and a chair by the window. But it was clean and warm, with thick blankets folded neatly at the foot of the bed. A wash basin and pitcher of water sat on the dresser. "I'll be just across the hall if you need anything," Isaac said from the doorway. "Sleep as long as you like in the morning, no rush to be anywhere." Kessa turned to face him, struggling to find adequate words. "I do not know how to thank you." "Then don't worry about it," Isaac said with an easy smile. "Just rest. Everything else can wait until tomorrow." He pulled the door closed behind him, leaving Kessa alone in the small room. She stood motionless for a long moment. half convinced this was some elaborate dream and she would wake back in Grell's cart or the slaver's cage. But the solid floor beneath her feet, the lingering taste of stew in her mouth, and the gentle ache of treated wounds on her wrists all insisted this was real. Slowly, Kessa removed her worn and dirty clothes and washed as best she could with the water in the basin. She found a clean, oversized shirt draped over the chair that Isaac must have left for her while she ate. It fell nearly to her knees and smelled of soap and sunshine. She climbed into the bed, which was softer than anything she had experienced in months, and pulled the blankets up to her chin. For the first time since her exile, Kessa allowed herself to cry. Not desperate, frightened tears, but something deeper, a release of tension she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten it was there. She cried for her lost clan, for the child she had saved and the price she had paid for that choice, for the terrifying uncertainty of her future. But somewhere beneath the sorrow was the smallest seed of something else. Hope, perhaps, or at least the memory of what hope felt like. Kessa woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of the water wheels steady turning. For a moment, disorientation clouded her thoughts. Then memory returned, along with the smell of something baking that made her stomach growl despite the large meal the night before. She dressed in her cleaned clothes, surprised to find them hanging on the chair. Isaac must have washed them at some point during the night or very early morning. The gesture touched her more than she wanted to admit. Downstairs, Isaac was pulling fresh bread from a small oven built into the side of the hearth. He looked up when she descended the stairs and offered a cheerful smile. "Good morning. I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in a long time," Kessa admitted. "Thank you for washing my clothes." Isaac waved off the gratitude. "They needed it and I was up early anyway. The mill business waits for no one." He set the bread on the table to cool and gestured to a chair. "Sit. Breakfast is almost ready." They ate bread with honey and butter, accompanied by boiled eggs and crisp apples from Isaac's small orchard. The meal was simple but delicious, and Kessa found herself relaxing in a way she had not expected. Isaac seemed content to eat in companionable silence, not pressing her with questions or expectations. Finally, as they were finishing, Isaac spoke. "I need to work the mill today. Several farmers are expecting their grain ground and I'm already a bit behind. You're welcome to stay here and rest, or if you're feeling up to it, you could help. I could use an extra pair of hands and the work isn't terribly complicated." Kessa seized on the offer immediately. The thought of sitting idle while Isaac worked felt wrong, and more than that, she needed to prove her worth, to show that his kindness had not been misplaced. "I will help. Tell me what needs doing." Isaac's smile widened. "Excellent. Fair warning, it's dusty work and you'll be covered in flour by day's end, but it's honest labor." They spent the morning in the mill, and Kessa quickly learned the rhythm of the work. Farmers would arrive with sacks of grain, which needed to be hauled up to the third floor and poured into the hopper. The grain would flow down through the grinding stones on the floor below, turned by the massive water wheel. The ground flour collected in containers that needed to be emptied into clean sacks, weighed, and returned to the farmers for a portion of the flour as payment. The work was indeed dusty, and physically demanding in a repetitive way that was different from the brutal labor of the slavers. But Kessa found satisfaction in it. Isaac was a patient teacher, showing her how to adjust the flow of grain, how to test if the stones were grinding to the proper consistency, how to tie the flour sacks so they would not spill during transport. The farmers who came and went eyed Kessa with varying degrees of suspicion and wariness. Some were openly hostile, muttering under their breath about orcs and questioning Isaac's judgment. But Isaac met each comment with calm, polite firmness. "Kessa is helping me today," he would say, his tone brooking no argument. "She's a good worker and I'm grateful for the assistance." One farmer, a grizzled man named Thomas, was more direct. "You're playing a dangerous game, Isaac. Orcs can't be trusted. Everyone knows that." Isaac paused in his work, meeting Thomas's gaze steadily. "What I know is that Kessa has worked hard all morning without complaint, has treated me and my property with respect, and has earned the wage I'll pay her. What I don't know is why you feel the need to judge someone you've never spoken to." Thomas grumbled but did not press the issue further. When he collected his flour and left, Kessa found her hands were shaking slightly. "You did not need to defend me," she said quietly. Isaac looked up from the sack he was tying. "Yes, I did. Thomas is a good man in many ways, but he's got blind spots like everyone else. Someone needs to challenge those blind spots, or they never change." They worked through midday, stopping only briefly for a quick meal of bread and cheese. By late afternoon, the flow of farmers had slowed to a trickle, and Isaac declared the day's work complete. They cleaned the mill together, sweeping up spilled flour and organizing the remaining sacks of grain. Back at the house, Isaac heated water for washing and gave Kessa privacy to clean the flour dust from her skin and hair. When she emerged, he had prepared another simple but hearty meal, this time a thick soup with vegetables from his garden and chunks of chicken. As they ate, Isaac broached the subject Kessa had been dreading. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I'm curious. How did you end up in that trader's cart? You clearly weren't born a slave." Kessa set down her spoon, considering how much to share. But Isaac had shown her nothing but kindness and honesty. He deserved the truth in return. "My clan lived in the borderlands," she began slowly. "We raided human settlements sometimes, took what we needed to survive. It was the way of things, or so I was taught." She paused, the memory still painful. 3 months ago, we raided a small farmstead. Most of the family fled, but there was a child, a human boy perhaps 6 years old. He had hidden in the barn, and one of our warriors found him. Isaac's expression was somber, but he did not interrupt. "The warrior was going to kill the child. It was what we always did, leave no witnesses, no one to raise alarm. But when I looked at that boy, terrified and crying for his mother, I could not let it happen. I stopped the warrior, fought him, let the child escape." Kessa's voice grew rough with emotion. "My clan considered this a betrayal. The warrior I fought was the chieftain's nephew. I was given a choice, be executed or be exiled." "You chose exile," Isaac said softly. Kessa nodded. "I thought I could make it to the neutral territories, find work somewhere humans and orcs traded peacefully. But I was alone. I did not know the land, and the slavers found me before I found safety. They sold me to Grell, who was supposed to take me to a farm that needed workers. And you know the rest." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "You saved a child's life at the cost of everything you knew. That took incredible courage." "It took stupidity," Kessa said bitterly. "I am alone in a world that hates me, with no clan, no home, no future. All because I could not do what needed to be done." "No," Isaac said firmly. "You did exactly what needed to be done. You saw a child in danger and you protected him. Consequences be damned. That's not stupidity, Kessa. That's heroism." Kessa looked up, startled by the conviction in his voice. "Humans do not see orcs as heroes." "This human does," Isaac replied simply. The words settled over them like a warm blanket, and Kessa felt that seed of hope from the previous night grow just a fraction larger. They finished their meal in comfortable silence, and afterward, Kessa helped Isaac clean up without being asked. Over the following days, a routine developed. Kessa would wake early and help Isaac with breakfast. They would work the mill together, handling the steady stream of farmers and their grain. In the evenings, they would prepare dinner, often sitting by the fire afterward while Isaac read aloud from his collection of books. Kessa had never learned to read, a fact that embarrassed her, but Isaac offered to teach her with such casual ease that she found herself agreeing. The reading lessons became a highlight of Kessa's days. Isaac was patient, never making her feel foolish when she struggled with letters or words. He started with simple things, teaching her to recognize her own name, then common words like bread and water and mill. Slowly, painstakingly, the strange symbols began to make sense. As the days turned into weeks, Kessa felt herself changing in ways both subtle and profound. The constant tension she had carried since her exile began to ease. She laughed more, a sound that startled her the first few times it emerged. She slept deeply and dreamlessly most nights, no longer waking at every small sound in terror. Isaac, for his part, seemed to enjoy her company. He spoke of his life with an openness that surprised her. His father had indeed been a soldier, but had died several years ago from an old war wound that had never properly healed. His mother had passed the previous winter from a fever. Isaac had inherited the mill and had been running it alone ever since. "Don't you get lonely?" Kessa asked one evening as they sat by the fire. Autumn had deepened into late October and frost touched the ground most mornings. Isaac considered the question. "Sometimes," he admitted. "The work keeps me busy, and I have friends in the village. But it's not the same as having someone to share daily life with, you know. Someone to talk to over breakfast, to help with the work, to simply be present." Kessa understood exactly what he meant. Since arriving at the mill, she had discovered how much she had missed simple companionship. The easy conversation over meals, the shared satisfaction of a hard day's work, the comfortable silence that fell between them as they pursued their separate tasks in the evening. She had also discovered something more troubling, though she tried to ignore it. She found herself noticing details about Isaac that had nothing to do with his kindness or his offer of shelter. The way his hair curled at the nape of his neck when it grew too long. The strength in his shoulders as he hauled grain sacks. The warmth of his smile when she successfully read a new word. The sound of his laughter, rich and genuine, when she made a dry observation about one of the more difficult farmers. These were dangerous thoughts for an orc woman to have about a human man. The world did not approve of such connections, and Kessa knew better than to imagine there could be anything more between them than the friendship they had built. Isaac had been kind to her, had given her shelter and purpose and hope, but that did not mean he saw her as anything other than someone in need of help. Still, as November arrived and the first real cold settled over the land, Kessa found it increasingly difficult to ignore the growing warmth in her chest whenever Isaac smiled at her, or the way her heart would lift when she heard him call her name. One particularly cold morning, Isaac announced they would need to travel to the village for supplies. "The first real snow won't be far off now," he explained. "We need to stock up on things I can't make or grow here. Lamp oil, salt, some tools that need replacing." Kessa felt a flutter of anxiety. "Will I be welcome in the village? Many of the farmers already look at me with suspicion." Isaac's expression turned thoughtful. "Some people will be uncomfortable, I won't lie to you, but you have every right to be there, same as anyone, and I'll be with you." They set out mid-morning, riding double on barley again. The village was perhaps a half-hour's ride from the mill, nestled in a small valley where several roads converged. It was larger than Kessa had expected, with perhaps 50 buildings including a church, a blacksmith, a general store, and an inn. As they rode down the main street, Kessa felt the weight of eyes upon her. Conversations stopped. People stared. A few made signs against evil, as if she were a demon rather than simply a woman. Kessa kept her head high, refusing to show how much the hostility affected her. Isaac guided Barley to the general store and helped Kessa dismount. The store owner, a portly man named Gerald, greeted Isaac warmly enough, but his expression cooled when he noticed Kessa. "Isaac," Gerald said carefully, "I heard you'd taken in that orc. Didn't quite believe it until now." "Kessa has been helping at the mill," Isaac replied evenly. "She's a good worker and a friend. We're here for supplies." Gerald's discomfort was obvious, but business was business. He took Isaac's list and began gathering items, though he kept shooting wary glances at Kessa. She stood near the door, trying to make herself as unobtrusive as possible. Other villagers came and went, and the whispers grew. Kessa caught fragments of conversation. "Unnatural, that's what it is. What's he thinking, keeping an orc at his mill? My Thomas said she's strong as an ox, but you can't trust them. Mark my words, she'll rob him blind or worse before winter's out." Isaac's jaw tightened as he overheard the gossip, but he said nothing, simply paid for the supplies and helped Kessa carry them to Barley. They were loading the saddlebags when a woman approached. She was perhaps 50 years old, with graying hair and a kind but weathered face. "Isaac Joranson," she said firmly. "A word, if you please." Isaac turned and his expression softened. "Mrs. Henley, of course." Mrs. Henley looked between Isaac and Kessa, her gaze assessing. "I've heard talk about you harboring an orc at your mill. I wanted to see for myself if there was truth to it." "There is," Isaac said calmly. "Kessa has been staying with me and helping with the work. Is there a problem?" Mrs. Henley studied Kessa for a long moment. Kessa met her gaze steadily, waiting for judgment or condemnation. Instead, Mrs. Henley's expression softened. "You're the one who stopped her clan from killing the Brennan boy, aren't you?" Mrs. Henley said. Kessa's eyes widened in shock. "How did you know about that?" "The Brennans are my cousins," Mrs. Henley explained. "They live about 20 miles north of here. When they came to visit last month, they told me about the raid, about how an orc woman fought her own clan to save young Peter. They've been looking for you, wanting to thank you properly." Tears pricked at Kessa's eyes unexpectedly. She had assumed the child and his family had simply been grateful to escape, that they would never spare a thought for the orc who had intervened. The idea that they had been searching for her, wanting to thank her, was almost too much to process. Mrs. Henley stepped closer and did something Kessa never expected. She reached out and clasped Kessa's hand in both of her own. "Thank you," she said simply. "Peter is the light of his parents' lives. You gave them back their son at great cost to yourself. That's a debt that can never be fully repaid, but please know you have friends in this village, whether the gossips approve or not." Kessa could only nod, not trusting her voice. Mrs. Henley gave her hand a final squeeze and then turned to Isaac. "You're a good man, Isaac Joranson, doing the right thing even when it's not the popular thing. Your parents would be proud." She glanced back at Kessa. "You're both welcome at my table anytime. Don't be strangers." She walked away, leaving Kessa and Isaac standing in the street. The watching crowd had heard every word, and the quality of the whispers changed. Not everyone would be swayed by Mrs. Henley's endorsement, but she was a respected member of the community, and her words carried weight. The ride back to the mill was quiet, both of them lost in thought. Once they arrived and had unloaded the supplies, Kessa finally found her voice. "I did not expect that," she said. "Any of it." Isaac smiled. "Mrs. Henley has a way of surprising people. She's got a good heart and she's not afraid to speak her mind." He paused, his expression turning serious. "But she was right about one thing. What you did for that boy was extraordinary. You should be proud of that choice, not ashamed of it." "It cost me everything," Kessa said softly. "And it saved a child's life," Isaac countered. That's not nothing, Kessa, that's everything. They stood in the fading afternoon light, the water wheel turning steadily behind them, and Kessa felt the walls she had built around her heart crack just a little further. She was not falling for Isaac Joranson, she told herself. That would be foolish and dangerous and utterly impossible. But as she looked at him standing there with flower dust still in his hair and understanding in his eyes, she knew she was lying to herself. The first snow came a week later, soft and gentle, dusting the world in white. Isaac declared it a holiday from mill work and instead focused on winterizing the property. Kessa helped him bank earth around the foundations to keep out drafts, check the roof for any damage, and bring in extra firewood. They worked well together, anticipating each other's movements, communicating with few words. It was comfortable and easy, and Kessa found herself smiling more than she had in years. That evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Isaac pulled out a small package wrapped in cloth. "I got you something when we were in the village," he said, sounding almost shy. "I hope you don't mind." Kessa accepted the package, curious. Inside she found a simple but well-made dress in a deep forest green, along with a warm woolen shawl. The fabric was soft and of good quality, far nicer than anything she had owned in recent memory. "Isaac, I cannot accept this," she said, though she desperately wanted to. "It is too much." "It's not nearly enough," Isaac replied. "You've been wearing the same clothes for weeks and winter's only going to get colder. Consider it payment for all your help at the mill," he smiled. "Besides, green suits you." Kessa held the dress against herself, feeling the softness of the fabric. No one had given her a gift like this since before her exile. The gesture touched her deeply, all the more so because Isaac seemed genuinely pleased to give it. "Thank you," she said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "I will treasure it." That night, alone in her room, Kessa tried on the dress and looked at herself in the small mirror above the dresser. The color did suit her, bringing out the deeper tones in her green skin. The dress fit well, obviously chosen with care for her height and build. She looked like a person again, not a slave or an exile, but someone of worth and dignity. She also looked, she realized with a start, like a woman who was falling hopelessly in love with a human miller who deserved so much better than the complications she would bring to his life. Kessa sat on the edge of the bed, the shawl wrapped around her shoulders, and forced herself to confront the truth she had been avoiding. She loved Isaac, not the gratitude of someone rescued, though she felt that too. Not simple companionship, though they had that in abundance. But the deep, soul-stirring love that made her want to wake up beside him every morning and fall asleep in his arms every night. The kind of love that made his happiness more important than her own. And it was impossible. The world would never accept an orc woman and a human man together. Isaac would face ostracism, possibly violence. His business would suffer. He might lose everything he had worked for, all because of her. The right thing to do, the selfless thing, would be to leave. To thank Isaac for his kindness and move on before she brought disaster down on his head. But the thought of leaving made her chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with physical pain. Kessa made a decision. She would stay through the winter, because leaving now would likely mean death in the cold. But when spring came and the roads were passable, she would go. She would find her way to the neutral territories and build a new life there. Isaac would be safe, his reputation intact, free to find a nice human woman to share his life with. The thought made her feel ill, but she knew it was the right choice. Having made the decision, Kessa expected to feel some sense of peace or resolution. Instead, she felt only a deep, aching sadness. But she had made harder choices before. She would survive this too. December arrived with a vengeance, bringing heavy snows and bitter cold. The mill work slowed significantly, as farmers were more concerned with surviving the winter than grinding grain. Isaac and Kessa settled into a quieter routine, spending long hours by the fire, reading and talking and simply being together. Isaac continued teaching Kessa to read, and she progressed faster than either of them expected. She devoured the books in Isaac's collection, hungry for the knowledge and stories they contained. Her favorite was a collection of old legends about heroes and quests, tales of honor and sacrifice that resonated deeply with her own experiences. They celebrated the winter solstice together, Isaac teaching Kessa the human traditions while she shared what she remembered of her clan's celebrations. It was bittersweet, remembering her old life, but Isaac's presence made the memories bearable. On the longest night of the year, they stayed up late, feeding the fire and watching snow fall past the windows. Isaac had made a special meal, roasted chicken with vegetables and a sweet cake made with honey and dried fruit. They ate until they were pleasantly full, then sat by the fire with cups of warm, spiced cider. "Thank you," Kessa said quietly, "for all of this. For giving me a home when I had none, for treating me like a person when the world sees me as a monster. I will never forget your kindness." Isaac looked at her, and something in his expression made Kessa's breath catch. "You're not a monster, Kessa. You're the bravest, kindest person I've ever met. Having you here has been a gift, not a burden." The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken things. Kessa wanted desperately to close the distance between them, to tell him how she felt, to damn the consequences and claim just one moment of happiness. But her resolution held. She would not ruin Isaac's life for her own selfish desires. "I should get to bed," she said, standing abruptly. "It is late." If Isaac was disappointed by her retreat, he hid it well. "Of course. Sleep well, Kessa." She fled to her room, closing the door and leaning against it, her heart pounding. That had been too close. She needed to be more careful, to guard her feelings better. Only a few more months until spring. She could manage that, but the winter seemed determined to test her resolve. A few weeks after the solstice, a fierce blizzard struck, trapping them inside for 3 days. The mill and house were well stocked, so they were in no danger, but the forced proximity made it increasingly difficult for Kessa to hide her feelings. She caught herself staring at Isaac as he worked on repairing a piece of equipment. She found excuses to stand close to him, to brush against him accidentally in the small space. She lived for his smiles, his laughter, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. And increasingly, she thought she saw something similar in his gaze, the way his eyes would linger on her, how he would find reasons to touch her hand or shoulder, the softness in his voice when he spoke her name. It was torture of the sweetest kind, and Kessa did not know how much more she could endure. The blizzard finally broke on the 4th day, and Kessa volunteered to help Isaac dig out the pathways to the mill and stable. The physical work was a relief, a way to burn off the restless energy that had been building inside her. They worked in companionable silence, their breath misting in the cold air. The world was transformed by snow, beautiful and pristine, the stream partially frozen where the current was slowest. Kessa paused to catch her breath, leaning on her shovel, and found Isaac watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. Isaac shook his head slightly, as if clearing his thoughts. "Nothing. I was just thinking how different things are from when I found you on that road. You looked so lost then, so frightened. Now you're here, strong and healthy and happy. It makes me glad." "You did that," Kessa said softly. "You gave me back my life." "You did that yourself," Isaac countered. "I just provided a safe place for you to heal." They stood there in the snow, the space between them feeling both vast and impossibly small. Kessa wanted to cross that distance more than she wanted her next breath, but she held herself still, frozen by more than just the winter cold. Isaac broke the moment, turning back to his shoveling. "Come on. The sooner we finish, the sooner we can get back inside where it's warm." January brought a brief thaw and with it, a visitor to the mill. Kessa was inside preparing midday meal when she heard voices outside. She recognized Isaac's tone, but the other voice was unfamiliar, female and urgent. Curiosity drew her to the window, where she saw a young woman speaking animatedly to Isaac. The woman was human, pretty in a delicate way, with blonde hair and a pink dress visible beneath her heavy cloak. She stood close to Isaac, one hand on his arm, her expression pleading. Kessa felt a sharp, unexpected stab of jealousy so strong it nearly stole her breath. She had no claim on Isaac, had deliberately avoided making any such claim, but seeing another woman touch him made something primal and possessive rise up inside her. Isaac seemed to be trying to extricate himself politely from the conversation, but the woman was persistent. Finally, he nodded and gestured toward the house. The woman smiled brilliantly and followed him inside. Kessa stepped back from the window, trying to compose herself before they entered. Isaac came through the door first, looking mildly uncomfortable. "Kessa, this is Victoria Ogden. Her father runs the largest farm in the area. Victoria, this is Kessa. She's been helping me at the mill." Victoria's gaze swept over Kessa, and her smile faltered for just a moment before returning, though cooler than before. "The orc. I've heard about you." "I imagine you have," Kessa replied evenly, refusing to be baited by the woman's tone. Victoria turned her attention back to Isaac. "As I was saying, Father is planning a dinner party next week to celebrate the thaw. He specifically asked me to extend an invitation to you. We've hardly seen you all winter, and everyone would love to catch up." Isaac looked distinctly uncomfortable. "That's kind of your father, but I'm not sure I can spare the time. The mill has been behind, and I need to catch up on work." "Oh, surely you can take one evening," Victoria said, moving closer to Isaac. "You work so hard, you deserve some leisure, and it would mean so much to Father, to all of us." Her meaning was painfully clear, at least to Kessa. Victoria was not just delivering an invitation. She was staking a claim. Kessa felt something inside her crack, the careful walls she had built around her heart crumbling. Isaac glanced at Kessa, and she saw conflict in his eyes. "I'll think about it," he told Victoria. "Send word about the specific date and time and I'll let you know." It was a polite dismissal, but Victoria seemed to take it as encouragement. She smiled again, touching Isaac's arm once more. "Wonderful. I'll tell Father you'll be there. I'm so looking forward to it." She swept out, leaving an awkward silence in her wake. Isaac ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. "Sorry about that. Victoria has been trying to get me to court her for the past 2 years. I've never encouraged it, but she doesn't seem to take the hint." "She is pretty," Kessa said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "And human." "Your neighbors would approve." Isaac's expression sharpened. "I don't care about the neighbors' approval, and pretty doesn't mean much if the person lacks substance." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something internal. "Kessa, I need to tell you something." Kessa's heart began to pound. "What is it?" Before Isaac could respond, they heard shouting from outside. Both of them rushed to the door to find a group of men on horseback riding up the path to the mill. They were rough-looking, armed, and clearly looking for trouble. The leader, a scarred man with cold eyes, dismounted and pointed at Kessa. "That's her. That's the orc slave that escaped from Merchant Grell. There's a bounty on her head." Kessa felt the world tilt. Grell had put a bounty on her. She was not just an abandoned slave, but an escaped one. That changed everything. If these men took her, she would face not just slavery again, but punishment for running. Isaac stepped in front of Kessa, his body language protective. She didn't escape. She was abandoned. Grell left her on the road when his buyer fell through. I have witnesses who saw him ride away without her. The bounty hunter sneered. Doesn't matter how she got free. She's Grell's property and he wants her back. We're authorized to retrieve her by any means necessary. Over my dead body, Isaac said flatly. The bounty hunter's hand moved to the sword at his belt. That can be arranged. Wait, Kessa pushed past Isaac, her mind racing. She could not let Isaac fight these men. He would be hurt or killed and it would be her fault. I will go with you, just leave him alone. No. Isaac grabbed her arm. Kessa, you're not property. You're a free person and I won't let them take you. There are 5 of them and 1 of you, Kessa said urgently. Please, Isaac, I cannot bear it if you are hurt because of me. And I can't bear letting them take you, Isaac shot back. He turned to the bounty hunters. How much is the bounty? I'll pay it. Whatever Grell is offering, I'll double it. The lead bounty hunter laughed. This isn't about money, Miller. It's about the principle. Can't have orcs thinking they can just walk away from their masters. Sets a bad precedent. She doesn't have a master, Isaac insisted. Grell abandoned her. That makes her a free person under the law. Your law, maybe, the bounty hunter said. Not ours. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Kessa could see no way out that did not end in violence. She was preparing to bolt, to run into the woods and draw the bounty hunters away from Isaac, when the sound of more hoofbeats filled the air. A new group of riders appeared, led by Mrs. Henley on a sturdy mare. Behind her were a dozen villagers, including several of the farmers Kessa had met at the mill. They arranged themselves between the bounty hunters and Isaac's property, a solid wall of determined faces. Mrs. Henley rode forward, her expression severe. Gentlemen, I believe you're on private property without permission. That's trespassing in these parts. The lead bounty hunter scowled. This is none of your concern, old woman. We're here for the orc slave. She's not a slave, Mrs. Henley said crisply. She's a free woman who saved my cousin's child, and you're threatening a respected member of our community. I'd say that makes it very much our concern. One of the farmers, Thomas, moved his horse forward. Kessa remembered him as one of the most hostile toward her initially. Mrs. Henley's right. You want to take Kessa, you'll have to go through all of us. And I'd advise against it. We may be simple folk, but there are more of us than you, and we know these lands better than any outsider. The bounty hunters looked around, clearly reassessing the situation. They were outnumbered and facing a unified group of locals who showed no signs of backing down. The lead hunter spat on the ground in disgust. This isn't over, he said. Grell has friends in the capital. He'll make trouble for all of you. Let him try, Mrs. Henley said. We're not afraid of a washed-up merchant with delusions of authority. Now get off this land before we decide to escort you out ourselves. The bounty hunters retreated, but their glares promised this was far from finished. Once they were out of sight, the villagers dismounted, gathering in Isaac's yard. Mrs. Henley approached Kessa, her expression kind. Are you all right, dear? Kessa nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. These people, who barely knew her, who had reason to fear and distrust orcs, had come to her defense. It was overwhelming. Isaac stepped forward, addressing the group. Thank you, all of you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't arrived when you did. Thomas shrugged, looking embarrassed. Mrs. Henley sent word that there were strangers asking about the orc at your mill. Figured you might need backup. Besides, Kessa's proved herself a good worker and a decent person. That's more than I can say for those bounty hunters. Other villagers murmured agreement. Kessa saw genuine acceptance in many of their faces, a stark contrast to the suspicion she had encountered months ago. Mrs. Henley organized the villagers to keep watch in shifts, ensuring the bounty hunters did not return. Several families brought food and supplies, insisting that Isaac and Kessa should not have to worry about provisions while dealing with this threat. As the sun set and the last of the villagers departed, Isaac and Kessa stood alone in the yard once more. The day's events had shaken them both, but had also clarified something important. "You were willing to give yourself up to protect me," Isaac said quietly. "Of course," Kessa replied. "I could not let you be hurt because of me." Isaac turned to face her fully, his expression intense. "And I couldn't let them take you. You understand why, Kessa," her breath caught. "Isaac, don't what? Don't tell you that I've fallen in love with you, because I have. Completely and irrevocably." The words hung in the air between them, too precious and too dangerous to touch. Kessa felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "You cannot love me," she whispered. "I am an orc. You are human. The world will never accept us together." "I don't care what the world accepts," Isaac said fiercely. "I care about you, your courage, your kindness, your strength. The way you laugh when you finally understand a difficult word, how you hum while you work, the fact that you were willing to sacrifice yourself to protect me today." He stepped closer, reaching up to gently wipe away her tears. "I love you, Kessa. I think I've loved you since the day I found you on that road, and I'm not going to let fear or prejudice or the world's narrow-mindedness take you away from me." "I plan to leave in the spring," Kessa confessed through her tears. "To go away and let you live a normal life with a nice human woman like Victoria." Isaac's expression softened with understanding. "I don't want Victoria. I don't want normal. I want you, Kessa, only you, if you'll have me." Kessa looked up into his earnest, loving face and felt the last of her resistance crumble. She had been so focused on protecting Isaac from the consequences of being with her that she had not considered what he wanted, what he was willing to risk for her. "I love you too," she said, the words breaking free like a river after the thaw. "I have tried so hard not to, but I cannot help it. You are everything good in this world, Isaac Joranson, and I love you more than I thought it possible to love anyone." Isaac smiled, radiant with joy, and pulled her into his arms. Kessa went willingly, burying her face in his shoulder, feeling his heartbeat against her chest. They stood there in the fading light, holding each other as if they could shield one another from the world's judgment through sheer force of will. When they finally pulled apart, Isaac kept his hands on her shoulders, his gaze never leaving hers. "I want to marry you," he said. "Properly, with witnesses and vows and everything. I want the world to know you're mine and I'm yours." "There will be consequences," Kessa warned, even as hope blazed in her heart. "People will turn against you. Your business may suffer." "Then we'll deal with it together," Isaac said simply. "I'm not afraid of consequences if it means spending my life with you." Kessa reached up and cupped his face in her hands, marveling that this man, this wonderful, brave, kind man, loved her in return. "Then yes, I will marry you." Isaac's answering smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and kissed her gently. It was Kessa's first kiss, sweet and tentative and perfect. She kissed him back, pouring all her love and hope and joy into that connection. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and grinning like fools. Isaac took her hand and led her back to the house, neither willing to be separated even for a moment. Over the following days, they made plans. Isaac spoke to the village priest, a kindly old man named Father Benedict, who agreed to perform the ceremony despite his own reservations about the match. Mrs. Henley took it upon herself to organize the wedding, insisting that it should be a proper celebration. Not everyone in the village was supportive. Some families made their disapproval clear, refusing to attend or do business with Isaac any longer. But more people than Kessa expected rallied around them, offering congratulations and help. The Brennan family traveled from their farm specifically to thank Kessa in person and to attend the wedding. Young Peter, the boy she had saved, hugged her fiercely and declared she was his hero. His parents presented her with a beautiful woven blanket as a wedding gift, tears streaming down their faces as they thanked her for giving them back their son. Victoria Ogden, unsurprisingly, was furious. She confronted Isaac in the village, making a scene about how he was throwing his life away on a monster. Isaac listened calmly, then said simply, "I'm marrying the woman I love. I'm sorry if that upsets you, Victoria, but my happiness is not dependent on your approval." The wedding took place on a clear February morning, unusual for the depth of winter but taken as a good omen. Kessa wore her green dress, supplemented with a crown of dried flowers that Mrs. Henley had woven for her. Isaac wore his best clothes, his hair neatly trimmed, his eyes shining with love and joy. The ceremony was held in the village church, which was fuller than Kessa had expected. Farmers she had worked alongside, villagers who had come to know her over the winter, Mrs. Henley and her extended family, the Brennans, and several others who believed in the rightness of this union. Father Benedict spoke eloquently about love transcending boundaries, about courage in the face of adversity, about choosing hope over fear. When it came time for the vows, Isaac's voice was steady and strong. "I, Isaac Joranson, take you, Kessa, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and stand beside you in all things. I promise to be your shield against a world that may not understand us, your comfort in times of sorrow and your partner in joy. From this day forward, you are my family, my home, and my heart." Kessa's own vows were simpler, but no less heartfelt. "I, Kessa, take you, Isaac Joranson, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you with all that I am. I promise to be faithful, to be strong when you need strength, and to be gentle when you need comfort. You gave me hope when I had none, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of your love." "You're already worthy," Isaac whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. Father Benedict pronounced them husband and wife, and when Isaac kissed his bride, the church erupted in applause. Kessa felt tears of joy streaming down her face as she kissed her husband, this man who had seen past her green skin and tusks to the person beneath, who had chosen her despite all the obstacles in their path. The celebration afterward was held at Mrs. Henley's large farmhouse, with food and drink and music that lasted late into the night. Kessa danced with Isaac, laughing as he tried to teach her the steps to traditional human dances. She accepted congratulations from people who had been strangers mere months ago, but who now felt like friends, like family. As the night wore on and they prepared to return to the mill, the Brennan family approached them one final time. Peter's father, a tall man with kind eyes, pressed a small purse into Isaac's hands. "This is for you both," he said. "We want you to have it to help build your life together. It's not nearly enough to repay the debt we owe Kessa, but please accept it with our blessing." Isaac tried to refuse, but Kessa placed her hand over his. "We accept with gratitude. Thank you for your kindness." The purse contained a surprising amount of silver, enough to make a real difference in their finances. But more precious than the money was the acceptance, the recognition that what they had done, the stand they had taken, mattered to people. Isaac and Kessa rode back to the mill through the quiet winter night, the stars brilliant overhead. At the house, Isaac swept Kessa into his arms and carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing at the traditional gesture. That night, they consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion, discovering each other with wonder and joy. Kessa had never felt more cherished, more loved, more wholly accepted than she did in Isaac's arms. And when they finally fell asleep, tangled together in the warmth of their bed, she knew she had truly found home. The remainder of winter passed in a blur of happiness. Kessa and Isaac settled into married life with ease, their partnership already well established from months of working and living together. They ran the mill as a team, with Kessa's strength and Isaac's knowledge creating an efficient operation that impressed even their most skeptical customers. Spring arrived gradually, the snow melting to reveal green shoots beneath. The stream that powered the mill swelled with runoff, the water wheel turning with renewed vigor. Farmers began arriving with grain from their winter stores, preparing for planting season. One warm April morning, a familiar figure appeared at the mill. Merchant Grell, looking haggard and furious, accompanied by two men who appeared to be some form of official representatives. Isaac stepped out to meet them, Kessa at his side. Grell. I'd say it's a pleasure, but we both know that would be a lie. Grell's eyes fixed on Kessa with undisguised hatred. She's mine. I paid good coin for that orc and she ran away. These men are from the magistrate's office. They're here to take her back into custody. One of the officials stepped forward, producing a document. I'm afraid it's true. Merchant Grell has presented proof of purchase, and by law escaped slaves must be returned to their rightful owners. She didn't escape, Isaac said calmly. Grell abandoned her on the road when his buyer died. I have witnesses. Lies, Grell spat. She's a slave and a thief. I want her arrested. Kessa felt ice settle in her stomach, but before she could speak, Mrs. Henley appeared, moving with surprising speed for a woman of her years. Behind her came Father Benedict, Thomas the farmer, Gerald from the general store, and a dozen other villagers. Did someone say witnesses? Mrs. Henley asked sweetly. Because I happened to be on that road the day Grell abandoned this young woman. I saw him throw her from his cart and leave her with no food, no shelter, and no care for what might happen to her. I saw it too, said another villager. Shameful it was. And I, added a third. One by one, the villagers stepped forward, each claiming to have witnessed Grell's abandonment of Kessa. It was a blatant lie, Kessa knew, an impossibility that so many people had been on that remote road at that exact moment. But they stood united, their expressions daring the officials to challenge their testimony. Father Benedict stepped forward, his presence commanding respect. Furthermore, I have here a marriage certificate showing that Kessa is now the lawfully wedded wife of Isaac Joranson, a free man and property owner in good standing. Even if she had been a slave, which I dispute, marriage to a free man would grant her freedom under the law. The official examined the certificate, his expression growing uncertain. This does complicate matters. There's nothing complicated about it, Isaac said firmly. Kessa is my wife, a free woman and a valued member of this community. Grell's claim has no legal standing. Grell's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is a conspiracy. You're all protecting a runaway slave. We're protecting one of our own, Thomas said bluntly. And you'd best remember you're outnumbered here, Grell. The officials conferred quietly, examining the documents and eyeing the crowd of hostile villagers. Finally, the lead official turned to Grell. I'm afraid the evidence doesn't support your claim, Merchant Grell. Multiple witnesses attest to abandonment and the marriage certificate grants freedom regardless. There's nothing more we can do here. Grell looked like he might explode. This isn't over. I'll appeal to the provincial governor. You're welcome to try, Isaac said mildly. But I suspect you'll find the outcome the same. Kessa is free. She's my wife and she's staying right here where she belongs. The officials and Grell departed, though not without many backward glances and muttered threats. Once they were out of sight, the assembled villagers erupted in cheers. Kessa found herself surrounded by well-wishers, people who had risked their own reputations and potentially legal trouble to protect her. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "All of you. I do not know how to repay such kindness." "You already have," Mrs. Henley said firmly. "You saved a child's life, you've been a good neighbor, and you make Isaac happier than I've ever seen him. That's payment enough." The crowd gradually dispersed, leaving Isaac and Kessa alone once more. They stood in the yard, hands clasped, looking at the mill and the house and the stream, at the life they had built together. "We did it," Kessa said softly. "We truly did it." Isaac pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "We did, and we'll keep doing it for the rest of our lives." As spring turned to summer, their life settled into a rhythm that felt almost miraculously normal. The mill prospered, with Kessa's reputation as a hard worker, and Isaac's skill creating an operation that attracted customers from further and further afield. Some still refused to do business with them because of Kessa, but more than enough others had no such qualms. Kessa continued her reading lessons, and discovered a talent for numbers that made her invaluable in managing the mill's accounts. She also began teaching herself to write, determined to record their story so that someday others might know that love could triumph over prejudice and fear. In midsummer, Kessa discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. Neither knew what to expect from a half-orc, half-human child. But when their daughter was born the following spring, she was perfect. Beautiful, with her mother's green-tinged skin softened to a pale sage color, her father's dark eyes and tiny tusks that would never grow larger than small points. They named her Tharka, after the orc woman who had changed Isaac's perspective years ago. Young Tharka grew up loved and protected, knowing she was the product of a love that had defied the world's expectations. More children followed, each one unique, each one cherished. The Joranson family became a fixture in the village, no longer exotic or scandalous, but simply part of the community's fabric. Kessa took in other outcasts when she could, offering the same sanctuary Isaac had once offered her. Years later, when Kessa and Isaac were old and gray, they would sit by the fire and tell their grandchildren the story of how they met. About a trader who abandoned an orc girl on the road, and a miller who found her and saw not a monster but a person worthy of love. About courage and kindness and choosing hope over fear. And their grandchildren, with their mixed heritage and open hearts, would carry that story forward into a world that was slowly, painfully learning that love recognized no boundaries of race or species, only the content of one's heart. But on that spring day when Isaac first told Kessa he loved her, when she first admitted her own feelings in return, none of that future was assured. All they had was each other, their love, and the determination to build a life together against all odds. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. The mill's water wheel turned steadily, marking the passage of time as Kessa and Isaac built their happily ever after, one day, one choice, one act of love at a time. And if the road had been hard and the obstacles many, well, that only made the happiness they found together all the sweeter. They had started as strangers from different worlds, brought together by chance and cruelty. But they became partners, lovers, husband and wife, and ultimately each other's home. And in the end, that was all that mattered.